Welcome to Running the Table, the podcast where we run through everything on the table in the world of sports, and we're going to run through the Eastern Conference Finals between the Miami Heat and the Boston Celtics. Tim, are you ready to go?
Took a bit longer for us to get to this point than we thought, but let's run it.
What was looking like a surefire sweep after game three got extended all the way to 7 games. Boston did not make it easy on them, ended up being a grueling 7 game marathon, but the 2004 Boston Red Sox still stand alone as the only team to come back down 0-3 and win. The Celtics ended up laying an egg in game seven, and the Miami
Mm.
Heat are advancing to the NBA Finals to face the Denver Nuggets. Tim, what did we see from this series?
I mean, you talk about ups and downs. This was a nail biter for both teams. For the Celtics, obviously, you're on the verge of being swept. Everything looks like you've lost hope. And then don't let us win one. And then
Mm-hmm.
they won one, and then two. And then they crawled all the way back to game seven. And now both sides are just absolutely on edge. But what it came down to is situationally, I do feel a little bit bad for Boston because we'll mention game seven. Tatum ends up with a twisted ankle on the very first play of the game. That I could tell you, I'm not sure if they would have won, but that drastically changed that game because Tatum, as much as he continued to play, he was grimacing throughout the entire game, and he did not look as explosive as normal. But I mean, Jimmy Butler was Jimmy Butler. He ended up winning the Eastern Conference Finals MVP. And he looked fantastic. 24.7 points per game, 7.6 rebounds, and 6.1 assists per game, which, him being the defensive mind he is, he also notched 2.6 steals. He was a key factor, especially in those first three wins. He had a little bit of rough time in those couple in between, but he came back and brought his confidence back for game seven. But I would say the real unsung hero, and obviously, I mean, people are giving him plenty of props, but I don't think it can be praised enough, the play of Caleb Martin. He looked absolutely incredible game in and game out. He may not have had the high volume numbers that Jimmy had in some of those games, which led his, scoring average to be higher, but he was consistent. I don't think he scored less than 14 or 15 points in any of these 7 games. Averaging 19.3 points, 6.4 rebounds on 60% shooting and 48.9% from three, which included in game seven, I believe he was 4 for 6 from three. He just looked. I honestly, what I saw from Caleb Barton is what I tend to expect from a healthy Jason Tatum. He just looked that confident. He was making those tough shots. He was just on. It's one of those times where when you grow into a role and he knew what he needed to do and he stepped up majorly, as did, a lot of the other Heat players.
Yeah, and speaking of Caleb Martin, you get a guy that bounced around the G League with Charlotte and then Miami, and then you call him up, and it seems like he's come out of nowhere. You mentioned those shooting numbers. He actually was the second leading scorer for the Heat in the series,
Yeah.
and not just him, but the entire depth of the Heat, that culture that Pat Riley and Eric Spoelstra have created for success when you're missing a Victor Oladipo for the rest of the playoffs, and you're missing Tyler Hero for most of the playoffs. Should be coming back though,
I
but
was going to say it'll be very interesting to see what they do with him because I
mhm.
believe he just literally recently, in the past day or two, got fully cleared to return to basketball activity. So whether or not he will have an effect on this NBA Finals series, that's going to be very interesting to watch because it's almost a little, if it ain't broke, don't
Don't
fix it.
fix it.
How
But
would you make those lineup changes? I don't know. That'll be interesting.
it's going to be interesting to see what they do with them. But back to the depth, you have guys like Caleb Martin, Gabe Vincent, Duncan Robinson, Max Strus, and even like some older veterans like Kevin Love, who got bought out mid-season and signed with Miami.
Yeah.
Like this culture is sustainable. And when I think if you look at the series as a whole on a sort of a different note, you got to look at it as two separate series. If you look at games 1 through 3
Yeah.
for
Two
Miami,
entirely different.
yeah, Miami had control. It seemed like they were going to dominate the whole way. I mean, they'd already run through the Bucks, run through the Knicks. It seemed like they were going to run through the Celtics, but they woke up the sleeping dog. And then you get to the second half of the series, games 4 through 7. Games 4 and 5 were
Boston turned it on there
complete
for
Boston takeovers. Game 6 should have been the one that Miami put away, which is something that, Tim, you didn't mention because you were talking about game 7. Game
yeah.
6 is the one that set up
Yeah.
this whole thing because the Derek White
Point
tip
one.
in, every second counted, and that was
That's why you
as
follow the
close.
shot.
Yep, that's as close as Miami came to putting away the finals and not having to go back to Boston to do the game 7
Yeah.
thing entirely. But what I want to highlight is not just game 6 in general, how the Miami Heat responded after game 6, because Eric Spoelstra went up on the podium and said, in 48 hours, when we go up to Boston, we'll be ready. And they were, because after the first quarter, about double-digit lead, the Heat didn't look back, and that was all she wrote. Now, you mentioned on the other side with the Celtics, Jason Tatum's hurt ankle, but the other element is Jaylen Brown as that second
I was gonna
star
say there were a lot of
didn't
other
answer
parts
the
of that
bell.
team that did also looked very bad, and it's like, okay, is it sort of a compounding effect thing when Jason Tatum's not playing well? Some of the guys around, you can't rely having as much attention on him as when he's healthy. Obviously, you got to pay so much attention to him when you know he's having a bit of an off game. He's struggling. You're able to pay attention a little bit to other parts of the team, but realistically, the team as a whole struggled mightily, and Jaylen Brown was the epitome of that struggle.
Yeah, the only one that actually played decent in game 7 was Derek White, continuing his
He tried
momentum
to
from
go
that game
takeover mode a
6.
little bit in game 7, and we haven't seen that out of Derek White before.
Yeah, he definitely tried to, and he stepped up big. But when the rest of the team just kind of falls flat, it also kind of makes you wonder what's next for the Boston Celtics, because like they just kind of ran out of gas at the end, and now you're left with a bunch of questions as far as the futures of Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, the rest of the Celtics, Joe Mazzulla, a big one, because it almost
Yeah,
seems
like
like he's
what
lost
is it
that
going to
locker
take?
room.
Yeah, what is it going to take for the Celtics team? Because I mean, you've got so many different additions and two of your guys playing pretty much in the heat of their primes. But the problem is now you got to start worrying about the contract issues, because now with Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, they're both looking for their super maxes.
Very,
And
very large supermaxes,
oh
especially
yeah,
considering
uh-huh.
with Jason Tatum being named first team All NBA and Jaylen Brown being named second team All
Yeah, I
NBA.
believe he was second team. Yeah.
Yep, that drives the price up for how much they could potentially make a little bit
Yeah,
more.
I think both of them are looking at like 250 plus million. I want to say Jason Tatum's like 300, or
Something
maybe they're
around
both
there.
300. Yeah, it's
It's
insane.
a
And I don't know, it's
large
so hard
sum.
to build a team around those type of supermax contracts, because obviously, I mean, it's crazy enough that they can get contracts that big in the first place. But how do you pay the rest of your guys? The main reason why the Heat
Decisions,
work so well
decisions.
is because you've got 8, 9 guys in that lineup that you can trust. But the thing
Mm-hmm.
is once you establish those guys as guy you can trust, you've got to be able to keep them on your team, because now other teams be like, all right, I like this guy, I like the way he plays. Say Caleb Barton, for example. Now you got to worry about keeping him on his roster, and his price tag just went up. So for the Celtics, how do you keep these guys together? And you talk about Mazzulla. I'm gonna be honest. I think they got flat out coached.
Oh, they absolutely did.
When
And
it came down to it, I don't
oh,
think that Joe Mazzulla is built in a leadership aspect. I'm sure he knows the game very, very well, but in a leadership aspect, I'm not sure if he has that type of edge for these type of experience, or just for the playoffs in general, because there's that much added pressure, it's that much added tactics. When you throw something at me, I'm going to throw something right back at you. And the thing is the Heat threw at him was their zone defense, and that's what they never found, really, the ability to throw something back at that zone defense. They couldn't find something that worked well enough, because that Heat defense really messed Boston up for a good part of the series.
well, I mean, Boston almost completed the historic comeback, but fell just one
Not
game
quite.
short. And there were so many elements that made all the difference. The questions for Boston, what now? And the Heat are moving on to the NBA Finals. So that's all we got for our Eastern Conference Finals recap. We're going to be previewing the NBA Finals between the Nuggets and the Heat here shortly, as well as bringing you recaps all throughout the finals as those games unfold. So if you want to watch our other stuff, we have other NBA content. We recap the Western Conference Finals, see what happened there, and we have a bunch of other stuff. NFL, MLB, college basketball, maybe a little bit of NHL, and anything else you guys want to see, so let us know. But until next time, like and subscribe, and we out. That black and white picture of Derek White is going to give me nightmares for the next week.
Poor hairline.
Poor face.